A slap on the courthouse steps turned a family matter into the Lakefield lawsuit. My father said, "I can't take sides," while my stepmother smiled for the cameras. I walked into the courtroom as the defendant and as a prosecutor for the North Shore County DA's office. They thought I only had grief. They forgot my grandfather was Judge Arthur Whitlow, and he was always 3 steps ahead. My name is Gabriella Thompson. The cold of the Harbor County Courthouse cut through my suit jacket, a damp, insidious chill that had nothing to do with the late October weather and everything to do with the spectacle unfolding on the marble steps. It was 8:45 in the morning. The flashbulbs were a form of assault, a series of white-hot explosions that left green-blue spots dancing in my vision. They were relentless, a feeding frenzy, and I was the bait. I kept my chin up, my gaze fixed on the heavy oak doors of the entrance, refusing to give them the reaction they craved. My breath plumed in the air, a steady, measured cloud. I would not let them see me tremble. To my left, a new ripple of excitement went through the press pack. Vanessa Hale, my stepmother, had arrived. She emerged from a black Escalade, draped in a cream-colored wool coat that probably cost more than my last 3 paychecks. Beside her, preening and predatory, was Colton Briggs. He was exactly the kind of lawyer you hire when the truth is an inconvenience, all teeth, tailoring, and a reputation for scorching the earth. Vanessa clutched his arm, a perfect portrait of the grieving, wronged matriarch. As she turned, she accidentally let her coat fall open, just enough for the cameras to catch the glint of the massive diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist, a new acquisition. She angled her hand toward the light, a calculated, almost imperceptible movement that made the diamonds flare with blinding fire. She was performance art. And then there was my father, Greg Thompson. He lingered by the Escalade's back door, half in, half out of the scene, a man perpetually caught in the liminal space of his own indecision. He was adjusting his tie, a nervous, repetitive gesture. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second across the sea of cameras. I saw the familiar flicker of shame, quickly extinguished and replaced by a defensive neutrality. He wouldn't look at me. He never could when it mattered. He just shuffled along behind Vanessa and Briggs, his head down, already mumbling the words I knew by heart, the ones he'd offered up my entire life as a shield against responsibility. "I can't choose sides," he said it to a reporter who shoved a microphone in his face, a pathetic, wheedling excuse that the wind nearly snatched away. I pushed through the doors. The warmth of the courthouse lobby was immediate, but offered no comfort. It smelled of old wood, floor wax, and the faint, dusty scent of decades of human misery. I passed through the metal detector, the familiar beep a mundane counterpoint to the circus outside. My heels clicked on the terrazzo floor, a sharp, solitary sound. I was on my home turf, and yet I had never felt more like an alien. Courtroom 3B was already filling up. The public gallery was a mix of the usual morning docket crowd and a startling number of reporters, recognizable by their trench coats and cynical expressions. I took the seat at the defendant's table. The wood was scarred with the carved initials of people whose lives had unraveled in this very spot. At precisely 9 o'clock, the bailiff, a man I'd shared coffee with 100 times in the cafeteria, called out in a voice devoid of any recognition, "All rise, the Honorable Judge Miriam Doyle presiding." We stood. Judge Doyle swept in, her black robes billowing. She was a no-nonsense jurist, fair but with an ice-water gaze that could freeze perjury in a witness's throat. She settled into her high-backed chair, shuffling a few papers, and then looked up, her eyes scanning the room. Her gaze landed on me. It wasn't hostile, not friendly, just appraising. She registered my presence at the defendant's table. Then her eyes flicked to the prosecution side, where I should have been, where I had been just yesterday, prosecuting a meth distributor. A flicker of something, surprise, curiosity, crossed her features before the mask of judicial impartiality snapped back into place. The whispers started almost immediately, a sibilant rush of sound from the gallery. "Is that her? Thompson? She's the defendant. But she's a prosecutor. How can she be both? She works for Pike, right? Judge Doyle banged her gavel, a sharp crack that silenced the room. This court is in session. Case number 22-947, Hale v. Thompson. A preliminary hearing on a motion to contest the will of Arthur Whitlow. Counsel, state your appearances. Colton Briggs shot to his feet, his voice smooth as polished granite. Colton Briggs for the petitioner, Your Honor, Vanessa Hale. I stood. Gabriella Thompson, Your Honor, Prosi, for the respondent. A lie, but a necessary one for this moment. Briggs smiled. A thin, reptilian stretch of the lips. He'd been waiting for this. Your Honor, before we proceed, Briggs began, his tone dripping with false concern. We have a preliminary matter of grave importance. We must move for an immediate competency evaluation of the respondent. The courtroom, which had just settled, erupted in low murmurs. Silence, Doyle snapped. On what grounds, Mr. Briggs? And be specific. I don't have time for theatrics. Your Honor, it is with a heavy heart, Briggs continued, placing a hand over his chest as if pledging allegiance. But Ms. Thompson has just suffered a profound personal loss. Her grandfather, the esteemed Judge Whitlow, passed away less than 2 weeks ago. We have credible concerns that her grief, combined with the pressures of her job, may be rendering her temporarily unstable. We believe she is not of sound mind to execute her duties as executrix, or frankly, Your Honor, to even represent herself in a matter of this magnitude. He let the accusation hang in the air, unstable. The word was a dart, aimed to poison the well before I'd even spoken a word. He was painting me as the hysterical, grieving granddaughter, incapable of rational thought. I felt the blood heat in my face, a hot, angry flush, but I willed it down. I remained standing, my hands clasped loosely on the table in front of me. I waited until Doyle's gaze shifted to me. Ms. Thompson? Your Honor, I said, my voice clear and steady, not a tremor. I was grateful for the years of training, for the hundreds of arraignments and plea hearings that had taught me to compartmentalize, to build a firewall between the personal and the professional. Mr. Briggs's concern for my mental well-being is touching, if entirely misplaced. A few chuckles from the lawyer section. Briggs's smile tightened. As a matter of procedure, I continued, reaching into my briefcase, I will not be representing myself. I am submitting my formal notice of representation. Evan Calder of Calder and Associates will be my counsel of record. I slid the paper across the table to the bailiff, who delivered it to the bench. Doyle scanned the document and nodded. Very well, Evan Calder is a fine attorney. So, your motion appears moot. Mr. Briggs. Not entirely, Your Honor, Briggs pressed, unwilling to let his advantage go. The core issue of her capacity to act as executrix remains. We believe she is vulnerable, perhaps even compromised. Compromised? I repeated, letting a small note of incredulity enter my voice. I took a half-step forward. Your Honor, as Mr. Briggs is so keen to point out, I am a prosecutor with the North Shore County District Attorney's Office. While he speculates about my emotional state, I can offer the court concrete facts. 3 days after my grandfather's funeral, I argued and won a complex fraud conviction in People v. Alistair Finch. It involved tracing digital assets across 3 shell corporations. My mind, I assure this court, is perfectly sound. Doyle's eyebrow went up. She remembered Finch. It was a messy, high-profile case. I had just, in one breath, established my credentials, my stability, and my willingness to fight. Briggs knew it. The color in his neck deepened. Before he could retort, Vanessa, the grieving widow-in-law, leaned over to the nearest reporter in the front row and whispered, loud enough for half the room to hear, I just want justice for my family. This is tearing us apart. It was a perfectly timed, perfectly delivered performance. Judge Doyle had seen enough. Thank you, Ms. Hale, she said, her voice edged with steel. This is a courtroom, not a theater, Mr. Briggs, your motion for a competency evaluation is denied. With prejudice, do not bring it up again unless you have a signed affidavit from a psychiatrist, which I doubt you will get. She looked at her calendar. This case is clogging my docket. I want a swift resolution. We will proceed with an expedited hearing on the merits of the will contest. Both parties will submit briefs by Friday at 5 p.m. We will convene for oral arguments Monday morning at 9 a.m. sharp. No continuances, no extensions. Is that clear? But, Your Honor, Briggs sputtered, the discovery, the witnesses. Is that clear, Mr. Briggs? Doyle repeated. Yes, Your Honor, he gritted out. Ms. Thompson? Crystal clear, Your Honor. Good. We are adjourned. The gavel cracked, and just like that, the fuse was lit. The room emptied in a rush of noise and adrenaline. I sat down, my legs suddenly feeling weak. The performance was over. The work began. I pulled my briefcase onto my lap and clicked it open. From it, I withdrew a single file. It was old, the brown leather soft as cloth, worn at the corners. It had been my grandfather's. On the spine, in faded gold leaf, was a simple label: Whitlow, Legacy, Control. I opened it. The smell of old paper, leather, and the faint, sweet scent of his pipe tobacco hit me like a physical blow. Inside, the pages were immaculate, filled with his precise, elegant script, cross-referenced with my own sharper, more urgent handwriting, spreadsheets, timelines, photocopied checks. My heart, which had been hammering against my ribs with a frantic, shaky rhythm, began to slow. The tremor in my hands steadied. The adrenaline of the confrontation faded, replaced by something colder, harder, a purpose. This wasn't going to be a battle of emotions. They could have the television cameras and the whispers. They could paint me as the unstable, grieving girl. I didn't care. This was going to be a battle of evidence. This was a fraud case, and I knew, better than anyone, how to win a fraud case. I looked up, across the aisle, near the exit. A local news cameraman was panning the room for B-roll. The red light passed over the press row, over Briggs, who was angrily stuffing papers into his briefcase, over Vanessa, who was already touching up her lipstick, and then it settled on my father. Greg Thompson was standing alone, abandoned by his wife and her lawyer. He was staring at me, his face pale, and for the first time in my entire life, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He wasn't looking at his daughter. He was looking at a prosecutor. He was seeing me, finally, not as a child he could disappoint, but as an adversary on the other side of the aisle. He finally understood. I closed the file. The leather cover snapped shut with a soft, definitive thud. They don't know what's coming, I whispered to myself, my gaze shifting to the empty public gallery bench where my grandfather had so often sat to watch me work. They had no idea at all. The leather file was a key, and it unlocked a door in my mind. The smell of old paper and tobacco wasn't just a scent, it was a time machine. The fluorescent lights of the courthouse hallway dissolved, and the cold marble under my feet was suddenly the worn wooden porch of a house in Riverside, Michigan. I am 6 years old. It is 18 years ago. The air is humid and thick with the smell of cut grass and car exhaust. I am standing on the top step, my hands twisting the hem of my yellow sundress. Greg, my father, is loading the last 2 suitcases into the trunk of a sedan I don't recognize. Vanessa is already in the passenger seat, tapping her long red fingernails on the dashboard. Her sunglasses already on, even though the sun is hiding behind a milky, overcast sky. Now, Gabby, Greg says, not looking at me. He slams the trunk lid shut. This is a good thing, a fresh start for us. You said a week, I whisper. My throat feels tight. It'll be just a few months, Vanessa calls from the car, her voice bright and brittle. Just until we get settled in Lakefield, you'll be fine. Your grandparents will spoil you rotten. Greg finally crouches down. His eyes are bloodshot. He smells like stale beer and the cheap cologne Vanessa likes. Be a good girl for Grandpa Arthur, okay? We'll be back before you know it. He hugs me, a quick, hard squeeze that smells of guilt. Then he gets in the car. The engine rumbles to life. I don't cry. I just watch the car pull away from the curb, watch it turn the corner at the end of the block, and watch the empty space where it used to be. A few months becomes the first great lie of my life. I am still standing there when the screen door creaks open behind me. My grandmother, Nora Whitlow, comes out. Her hands are dusted with flour, and she smells of cinnamon and safety. She doesn't say anything. She just sits on the top step and pulls me into her lap, her arms a warm, soft fortress. We sit there until the sky turns from gray to purple. Then, Judge Arthur Whitlow's car pulls into the driveway. His headlights cut through the new dark. He gets out, his tall frame unbending from the driver's seat. He's still in his suit, his tie loosened. He sees us on the porch, and his face, usually so composed, softens. He walks up the steps and places a large, warm hand on my shoulder. He looks at Nora, then at me. "I will be here every day," he says. His voice is a low, steady rumble. It is not a comfort, it is a contract. And he is... The guest room, which becomes my room, has a large calendar on the wall, one of those free ones from the bank. At first, I use it to mark the days until Greg and Vanessa come back. Greg calls every Sunday. "Next weekend, Gabby, I promise." A red X appears on Saturday. "Something came up, honey, business." Another red X on the next Saturday. "Vanessa's not feeling well." The weeks become a long, unbroken chain of red X's. After 3 months, I stop marking the calendar. After 6 months, I take it down. The birthday cards start arriving. They are always large, glittery, and musical. They are always signed in Vanessa's looping, ostentatious script. Love, Dad and Vanessa. Inside, the pre-printed message says everything. The blank space below it, where a personal note should be, says more. 1 year. For my 10th birthday. The card is for a special nephew. They just crossed out nephew and wrote niece. There is a $20 bill inside. My world becomes the house on Elm Street. It becomes my grandmother's baking and my grandfather's library. The library is my sanctuary. It smells of leather, lemon oil, and old, important paper. Arthur finds me in there one night, long after bedtime, trying to read a thick, heavy book. It's a trial transcript. "That's dry reading for a 9-year-old, he says, leaning against the doorframe. "Who is the plaintiff?" I ask. He smiles, a rare, full smile that reaches his eyes. He sits in his big leather chair and motions for me to sit on the ottoman. "The plaintiff," he says, "is the person who believes a wrong has been done to them." That night, he doesn't read me a fairy tale. He tells me a story. He tells me about a case called Donahue Vise. Stevenson. He makes it sound like a mystery, a story of a woman and a contaminated bottle of ginger beer. He simplifies the legal principle, boiling it down to its core. "It's about duty, Gabriella," he says, his voice a quiet rumble in the dimly lit room. "It's about owing a duty of care to your neighbor, not just the person who lives next door, but anyone who might be affected by what you do. These are my bedtime stories, not princesses and dragons, but parables of justice, simplified precedents, and lessons in moral reasoning. He is teaching me to read the world, not just the words. He is teaching me to look for the facts beneath the performance. I am 14. The auditorium at Riverside Middle School is hot and smells of floor wax and adolescent sweat. I'm at the podium, my notes shaking in my hand. It's the final round of the district-wide oratory competition. My topic, accountability in public life. I win. The principal calls my name, and the applause is a dull roar in my ears. I accept the small, laminated plaque. I scan the audience. In the front row are 2 empty seats. They have small, printed reserved signs on them, just as I'd requested. Reserved. Greg and Vanessa Thompson. They said they'd come. They were only a 2-hour drive away in Lakefield. They didn't even call. I am 16. The church is cold. It's January, and the stained glass windows are weeping with condensation. My grandmother Nora is gone. It was fast. A stroke. My grandfather sits in the front pew, his back a rigid, unbending line of black wool. I am holding his hand, and it feels like holding a piece of cold marble. The service is supposed to start at 10:15. The side door of the church opens, and Vanessa clicks in on stiletto heels, her black dress too tight, too short. She is followed by Greg, who looks like a ghost in a borrowed suit. "The traffic was just awful," Vanessa whispers to a cousin, loud enough for the entire pew to hear. "And this humidity, my God, it's ruining my dress. This silk just wrinkles if you look at it." She doesn't hug my grandfather. She doesn't look at me. She sits down, checks her makeup in a compact mirror, and sighs. They stay for exactly 45 minutes. As the final hymn starts, Vanessa leans over and whispers to Greg. He nods. She stands up, and Greg follows her like a shadow. I watch them go. Vanessa mutters something about a spa appointment she just couldn't move. They are out the door before the casket is even moved. That night, in the quiet, empty house, my grandfather and I are sitting in the library. He is staring into a fire he built, but that gives off no warmth. "They didn't even stay," I say, the words hot with a fury I don't know what to do with. "She complained about her dress." Arthur turns to me. His eyes are hollowed out by grief, but they are focused. They are clear. "Gabriella," he says, his voice rough, "you will meet many people in this life who build their world out of lies. They lie to themselves, and they lie to others. They are loud. They are distracting. Do not let them change your facts." He leans forward, putting his hand on my arm. "Justice is sometimes just outlasting the lie. You stand on the truth. You stand on it, and you do not move, no matter how hard they push." That is the night I decide to become a lawyer. I am 22. I am in a cap and gown, sweltering under the Michigan sun. I have graduated from the University of Michigan, summa cum laude. Arthur is in the audience, and he stands and applauds so loudly that the people in his row turn to look at him. He doesn't care. Later, at the celebratory dinner, I set up a small camera on a tripod for a photo. Arthur on one side, me in the middle, and on my other side, an empty chair. I had sent them an invitation. Greg called. "We're so proud, Gabby, but Vanessa's new boutique. It's the grand opening. I can't leave her alone." In the photograph, I am smiling. I look bright and hopeful. But the empty chair is a dark space, a void in the picture. I label it the Thompson family. The visits from Greg are sporadic. They usually happen when I'm home from law school on a break. He always comes alone. He always looks tired. And he always, eventually, gets to the point. "Your grandfather," he'd start, stirring a coffee I made him that he won't drink. "He's doing okay? He seems good." "He's good, Dad." "That's good. That's great." A pause. He'd rub the back of his neck. "Listen, honey, I wouldn't ask. But Vanessa's onto this new thing, a high-end consignment shop. It's a sure thing. We just need a little bridge loan, just to cover the inventory, maybe 10,000. I tell him I don't have that kind of money. I'm a law student living on loans. I know, he'd say, his voice wheedling. "But you could, mention it to Arthur. Just float the idea. He respects you." "I'm not asking him for money for you, Dad." "It's not for me, Gabby. It's for us. It's for the family." He always leaves empty-handed, but the visits leave a sour, metallic taste in my mouth. The week before I moved to Lakefield to start my job at the DA's office, the irony is not lost on me, Arthur takes me to dinner. He slides an envelope across the table. "What's this?" I ask. "A graduation present," he says. Inside is a cashier's check. It is for the exact, to the penny amount of my student loan debt. "Grandpa, I can't," I whisper. This is everything." "You cannot be a good lawyer if you are a desperate lawyer," he says simply. "You cannot serve justice if you are buried in debt. This is not a gift. It is an investment. In you, in the work, he sips his water, and Gabriella, a condition. Anything. We will not be mentioning this to your father or to Vanessa. It would only create conflict. I understand. It's not a secret. It's a strategic move. It's a way to keep me safe, to keep me separate from the endless, grasping need that defines them. To avoid conflict, I agree. It is a rainy night. 2 years later, Arthur has been gone for a week. The house is too quiet. I am in his library, the one I will have to sell, going through his files. The sheer volume of his life's organization is staggering, and I find a notebook, a simple, spiral-bound stenopad. It's not a journal, it's a log. Page after page of dates and amounts and small, precise notes. April 2002. Vanessa requested another $2,500 a month, just until she's stable. June 2005. Greg called. Vanessa's boutique failed. Emergency loan, $10,000. August 2011. Cabo trip for family bonding, $3,000. September 2018. Vanessa needs capital for new online venture, $5,000. The entries go on for 22 years, a steady, relentless bleed. I sit there, the only sound the rain against the window and the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. I am a prosecutor. I am trained to see patterns, and this is the clearest pattern I have ever seen. It's not a story of generosity, it's a story of extortion. I turn the page. The last entry is from 6 months ago. His handwriting is slightly less firm, but still legible. Vanessa stopped by, brought unsigned medical POA, asked about managing my accounts. I told her Marta handles my bills. She stayed for 7 minutes. My blood runs cold. I look at the small, neat column of figures. The $2,500 a month, every month, for 2 decades. The emergency loans, the investments. These numbers aren't just a sad family history. They are a motive. They are a weapon. They are the sharp, steel-tipped spear that will unravel their entire story. The grief in my chest, a heavy, suffocating weight, shifts. It doesn't disappear, but it makes room for something else. Something cold, clear, and hard as a diamond. The girl on the porch is gone. The prosecutor is here, and I am holding the evidence. The days between the funeral and that first courthouse appearance were not spent in grief, not in the traditional sense. Grief was a fog, but my grandfather had given me a compass, and the case was a high-powered beam cutting right through it. The fog could wait. The afternoon after the funeral, after the last casserole dish was returned and the last platitude offered, I was alone in his library. The silence was heavy, oppressive. I walked to the painting behind his desk, a dark, moody landscape of the Scottish Highlands. I pressed the third ridge in the oak frame, just as he'd shown me. A quiet click, and the painting swung open, revealing a wall safe. The combination was my grandmother's birthday. Inside, there wasn't much, just a few pieces of Nora's jewelry and a thick, leather-bound ledger. It was identical to the stenopad I'd found earlier, but this was the official record. I took it to his desk. I opened it. The first entry was dated 22 years ago, just 3 months after my father married Vanessa. Transfer to V. Hale, $2,500 per request. And so it began. Month after month, $2,500. Sometimes V. Hale, sometimes G. Thompson, Act V.H. Every entry was in his perfect, steady script. Then there were the emergencies, $10,000 here. Marked boutique inventory, $5,000. Car repair, Greg, another $15,000. Consolidated debt. I sat there for hours, the only light from the green-shaded desk lamp, a simple calculator in my hand. The monthly payments alone, $2,500, times 12 months, times 22 years. I punched the numbers. $660,000. That was the base. That was the retainer. That was the price Arthur paid to keep them. I realized with a sickening jolt, at a distance. I added up the emergencies, It was another $142,000, over $800,000, all of it documented. My training kicked in. This was the discovery phase. I turned on his desktop computer. His password was, of course, Scalia 1986. I opened his email. I searched for Vanessa. The Vanessa requests folder was immaculate. He had saved everything. He had treated her as a hostile witness for 2 decades. The subject lines were a masterclass in passive aggression. A small issue. Greg needs capital. Quick favor. Thinking of you, and a small request. I cross-referenced the emails with the ledger. An email from 2013. Arthur. Darling, Greg is so close to landing the North Cone deal. He just needs a little more capital to look the part. You know how business is. A week later, the ledger showed a $15,000 transfer. An email from 2017. I'm trying to book tickets for us all to go to Cabo for some real family bonding. We never see you, but airfare is just insane. Can you help? The ledger. 3 days later. Transfer. $3,000. Cabo. I pulled up Vanessa's social media. It wasn't hard. It was all public. A curated monument to her own fabulousness. I scrolled back to 2017. There was the Cabo trip, photos of her and my father, sunglasses on, margaritas in hand, no photos of Arthur. I searched his calendar for that week. He had 2 entries, Chemo, N, Whitlow, and Chemo, N, Whitlow. It was the week before my grandmother died. Vanessa had requested money for a family bonding trip while my grandmother was in chemotherapy, and she hadn't even invited Arthur. I kept scrolling, a photo from 2 years ago, Vanessa on a golf course, clinking champagne glasses, the caption, Celebrating life, blessed. The date stamp was June 14th. I checked my own calendar. That was the day of my grandfather's 85th birthday party. The party she and my father couldn't make because, as she told me over the phone, Arthur understands. Honey, we're just so swamped with work. The rage was so cold, so pure. It was almost clarifying. This was not a family dispute. This was a long con. I hired Tessa Green the next day. Tessa is a bulldog, the best private investigator in the state, and she owes me a favor after I got her key witness in the Finch case to flip. I gave her one name, Colton Briggs. Tessa called back in 6 hours. He's a specialist. Gabby, she said, her voice gravelly over the phone. Briggs doesn't do normal probate. He does this exact thing. I found 3 cases in the last 5 years. Henry Johnson, Estate of Price, Barlow v. Barlow, all 3 involved an elderly, wealthy benefactor. A last minute will change. And a younger family member being painted as unstable or unduly influencing. He lost 2. But he tied the Johnson estate up in court for so long the executrix gave up and settled for 30%. So that's the play, I said. Not to win, just to bleed me until I fold. That's the play, Tessa confirmed. He pulls a competency evaluation, files a dozen motions, buries you in paperwork, standard scorched earth. By the way, you should check your messages at the office, anonymously, of course. I hung up and checked my work voicemail. There it was, logged at 8:03 a.m., an anonymous tip from a concerned citizen. The voice was digitally muffled. You need to look into Gabriella Thompson, using her position as a prosecutor, intimidating her family, abusing her power. She's not stable. She's abusing her position. It was the exact language Briggs had used in his motion. I sent the audio file to Tessa. Give me an hour, she said. 45 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from Tessa. Call came from a burner, but the burner was purchased with a credit card belonging to a Ms. Anya Petrova. Anya Petrova is a junior assistant at Amber & Company Public Relations, and Amber & Company was hired on retainer by Vanessa Hale, 3 days after Arthur died. They weren't just attacking me. They were coordinating a smear campaign. My next stop was the bank. Samuel Ortiz, the branch manager, was an old-school guy. He wore a tie clip and always addressed Arthur as Judge Whitlow. He looked pained when he saw me. "Gabriella," he said, ushering me into his office. "My deepest condolences. Your grandfather was a pillar." "Thank you. Samuel, I'm here as the executrix." I showed him the letters testamentary. "I need to see all of my grandfather's account activity for the last 6 months." "Of course," he typed, his face grim. "I was expecting you. I'm glad you're the one handling this. I have to be honest. I was very concerned." "Concerned about what?" "Your stepmother, Vanessa Hale." Samuel printed a stack of papers. "She came in 4 times in the last month of your grandfather's life." My blood went still. "For what?" "The first 3 times," he said, reading from his notes, "she attempted to be added to Judge Whitlow's checking account. She brought a general power of attorney form. I told her our bank requires a specific durable POA for financial matters, signed and notarized." "And the 4th time?" "That was difficult." Samuel leaned forward. "It was 4 days before he passed. She came in with a document. It was a healthcare proxy, a medical power of attorney, and she was insistent. She said, 'Arthur is not lucid, and I am in charge of his care. I need to pay his bills.' She demanded access." "What did you do?" "I looked at the document. It was a standard form, but the signature, it wasn't notarized, and more importantly, it wasn't signed by Judge Whitlow. It was blank. She was trying to get access to a $2 million portfolio with an unsigned piece of paper." He pointed to a line item on the printout. "I refused. She was unpleasant. I called Judge Whitlow at home, just to confirm. He answered on the 2nd ring." "Was he lucid?" Samuel smiled. "He was sharper than I am." He said, "Samuel, thank you for your diligence. Ms. Hale has no authority over my accounts, and she never will. Please note that for the record." Then he asked me about my daughter's college applications for 5 minutes. He was fine. "Did you log that?" "I did." I left the bank with copies of everything. The picture was getting clearer. Desperation, a blatant, last-ditch attempt to seize control when she knew he was fading. When I got back to the house, Marta Alvarez, his housekeeper of 30 years, was packing a box of her things. She was weeping quietly. "Marta," I said, my voice gentle, "you don't have to go today." "Oh, Miss Gabriella," she said, wiping her eyes. "He was such a good man, and they are not—" "Marta, did you see Vanessa in the last month?" Her face darkened. "That woman, she was here, always when she thought he was sleeping, but he was not. He was just resting. I kept a journal," she said, tapping her temple. "He told me to, after your grandmother passed. 'Marta,' he said, 'be my eyes. Write down what you see. Facts, not feelings.'" She went to her bag and pulled out a small, worn spiral notebook. "He managed everything, Miss Gabriella. To the end. He paid me, in cash, from his wallet, every Friday. He wrote the checks for the gardener. He was on his computer, paying his credit card bill, 2 days before he went to the hospital." Her journal was a log of facts. "Mr. Arthur, lucid, and reading the Wall Street Journal. 8 a.m. Ms. Hale arrived at 2:15 p.m., did not bring food, left at 2:25 p.m. Mr. Arthur balanced his checkbook, 6 p.m. It was a perfect rebuttal to any claim of incapacity. That night, I was sitting at his desk, the weight of all the evidence settling on me. I ran my hand along the underside of the main drawer, a habit from when I was a child. My fingers brushed against a small, recessed latch. I'd forgotten all about it. I pressed. A false panel on the side of the desk, hidden by the deep carvings, clicked open. A secret compartment. Inside, 2 items. The first was a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with Arthur's signet ring, in red wax. Written on the front in his unmistakable script were 2 words: Probate Court. I didn't open it. I held it up to the light. It was a formal letter, perhaps 4 or 5 pages. a failsafe, a final statement, written when he was sound of mind, to be delivered directly to the court, anticipating a fight he knew would come. The second item was a simple, black USB flash drive. Taped to it was a small white label. Again in his hand, Vanessa, 2024, consensual recording, state law compliant. My hands were shaking. I plugged the drive into his computer. It contained 3 audio files. I clicked the first one. It was Arthur's voice, frail but clear. "This is Arthur Whitlow. It is March 14th, 2024. I am recording this call with Vanessa Hale, who is on speakerphone, and I am informing her that this call is being recorded for legal purposes." Recorded? Arthur, for heaven's sake, Vanessa's voice, tinny and annoyed. "That's so dramatic." "Is it?" His voice was tired. "You said you had a quick question." "I do. It's just, Greg and I were looking at the Lakefield house. The taxes are just criminal, and with you, not doing so well. We were just thinking, it would be so much easier on you if we just combined our finances. You could add Greg to your main account, just to make things smoother." "Smoother for whom, Vanessa?" "For all of us. I'm trying to help you. You're all alone in that big house. You shouldn't be worried about bills." "I am perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. The answer is no." "Don't be difficult, Arthur. We are your family. We're all you have left." The click of him hanging up was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. I listened to all 3 calls. It was the same script. Her, pushing, cajoling, demanding, him, a wall of tired, firm resistance. He had been building his own case. I put the USB drive back in the compartment, but there was something else, fallen to the back. A third item, another envelope, smaller, simpler, a standard white business envelope, sealed. On the front, in his handwriting, a different message. It wasn't for the court, it was for me. It said, "Gabriella, open when they attack you." I sat back, the envelope heavy in my hand. I compiled my timeline. I put Vanessa's boutique failures from the public record next to the emergency loan requests. They matched, dollar for dollar. I put her can't visit texts next to her social media posts of spa days and golf trips. The picture was no longer just clear, it was complete. A small, cold smile touched my lips. The motive was everything, and I had it, in triplicate. The first shot was not fired in court. It was fired on cheap, graying newsprint. The Lakefield Ledger hit the stands at dawn, 2 days after my appearance. I saw it from my kitchen window, sitting folded on my walkway like a small, damp bomb. I brought it inside, the ink staining my fingers. The headline was a masterpiece of manufactured victimhood, splayed across the entire front page. "Grieving stepmother fights for manipulated legacy." And there she was, Vanessa, in a photo taken through a soft focus lens. She was wearing a tasteful black dress, clutching a framed, smiling picture of Arthur. A single, perfect tear was captured, glistening on her cheek. The interview inside was even better. I don't understand what happened," she'd sobbed to the reporter. "Gabriella was always an intense child, but after Arthur passed, she changed. She barred me from seeing my own father-in-law in his final, painful days. She locked me out. I am not doing this for the money. I am doing this to honor his true wishes he was too frail to defend from her." My phone began to detonate. Texts from colleagues at the DA's office, emails from old law school professors. "Are you seeing this, Gabby? This is actionable slander. You need to get out in front of this. Hold a press conference." They all wanted me to respond, to fight back, to match her televised tears with my own righteous anger. I did not. I authorized Evan Calder to release a single statement. It went out on the wire at 4 p.m., just as the evening news cycle was starting. "We will not litigate this matter in the press. We look forward to presenting the actual, verifiable facts in the courtroom. See you in court." It was cold, it was professional, and it was a promise. Briggs, of course, was not satisfied. The narrative needed more fuel. The next day, a concerned leak emerged online. On a popular local gossip blog, it was a preliminary psychological assessment, supposedly from a source close to the family, suggesting I was suffering from severe emotional distress and persecutory delusions following my grandfather's passing. It was a complete fabrication. It was also, legally, brilliant. It wasn't an official document, so he couldn't be sanctioned for filing it, but it looked real enough to poison the well and give his case a desperate, unearned legitimacy. I didn't have to trace it. Tessa Green did. She was already working. The invoice for the assessment was paid by Amber and Company, Tessa reported, her voice gravelly over the phone. The PR firm. The same one that set up the Ledger interview and leaked the photo. They're running a full-spectrum campaign. Gabby. He's running his standard probate playbook, I said, looking at the file she'd sent on Briggs's previous 3 estate contests. Create the narrative of the unstable, greedy heir. He's not the only one, Tessa said quietly. You might want to know. Your father just walked into your office building. What? My blood ran cold. Greg Thompson walked into the North Shore County DA's building 10 minutes ago. He's at the front desk. I hung up and dialed my boss's private line. Jordan Pike, the district attorney, picked up on the second ring. Gabriella, he said, his voice preternaturally calm. I was just about to call you. He's there, isn't he? Jordan, I am so sorry. Stop, Pike said, his voice firm, cutting off my apology. You are my prosecutor. You are one of my best. I am handling this. Your father is currently in my reception area. He is expressing grave concerns for his daughter's emotional stability. My stomach twisted. This was the real betrayal. This was worse than the slap. Worse than the lawsuit. This was an attempt on my life, my career. He's trying to get me put on administrative leave, I whispered, the strategy suddenly, horrifyingly clear. If I was on leave, it would validate Briggs's entire motion. It's a smart move, Pike agreed, his voice hard. But it's clumsy. I just had my assistant interrupt his monologue. I have politely informed Mr. Thompson that if he has a formal complaint regarding the professional conduct or fitness for duty of an assistant district attorney, he must submit it in writing, signed and notarized, through official channels. Otherwise, he is wasting county time and taxpayer resources, and that I would be happy to discuss his concerns with him, under oath. I heard muffled, angry sounds in the background of Pike's call. My father, protesting, his voice rising in that familiar, wheedling tone. He seems flustered, Pike said, his voice dry. He's leaving. And Gabriella? Yes, sir? The hearing is on Monday. I'll be in the gallery to support my prosecutor. The line clicked dead. For a full minute, I couldn't breathe. My father had just tried to professionally execute me to prop up his wife's lie, and my boss, a man I barely knew outside of staff meetings, had just taken my side, loud and clear. The PR war wasn't entirely one-sided. The Ledger, likely facing a libel suit, was forced to print an open letter from Arthur's neighbors. It was titled, The Arthur Whitlow We Knew. We are writing, it began, to correct the slanderous portrayal of our friend. Arthur Whitlow was the sharpest man on this block. He walked 2 miles every morning and was completing the New York Times crossword puzzle, in ink, until his final week. The only person barring visitors was Arthur himself, who had little patience for televised drama and even less for those who brought it to his door. It helped. It wasn't as splashy as Vanessa's tears, but it was the truth. Vanessa must have felt the shift in the wind, the subtle turning of the tide. My personal cell phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. Gabriella, honey, it's me. Vanessa. Her voice was pure treacle, dripping with a false, warm intimacy that made my skin crawl. This has all gotten so ugly, she sighed. It's not what your grandfather would have wanted. We're family. Gabby, blood. You're suing me, Vanessa. It's just paper. Silly paper. Listen, Greg and I, we've been talking. We want to make this right. Let's just stop the lawyers. They're the only ones getting rich. We'll settle this. We're willing to be generous. Generous, I repeated, my voice flat. Yes, darling. 60-40? I almost laughed. 60-40? Yes, we get 60% for the pain and for being, the immediate family, and you get 40%. It's a wonderful offer. It's more than fair. I have a better offer, Vanessa, I said, my voice as calm and steady as D.A. Pike's. It's called the will. The court will decide. I hung up the phone. The next morning, Briggs filed an emergency motion. He petitioned the court for a shortened preparation timeline. To avoid prolonging the family's pain, the motion read, and to resolve this matter with the dignity this family deserves. He's boxing us in, Evan said, pacing his office. He got your "see you in court" statement, and he's using it. He knows we're still digging. He wants to get to a hearing before our subpoenas land and before his client's deposition. Let him, I said. Let's go see Judge Doyle. Doyle was not amused. She stared down at Briggs from the bench. Mr. Briggs, you are asking for an expedited hearing on a matter you claim is about prolonged family pain. Yet my clerk informs me your office is the one leaking fraudulent psychological reports to the press this week. Briggs's face went a shade of pale gray I'd never seen before. He hadn't expected Doyle to read the blogs. Your Honor, I strongly object to that characterization. Objection noted and overruled, Doyle snapped. Sit down, Mr. Calder. Your response to this motion to expedite? We agree, Your Honor, Evan said smoothly, standing up. The plaintiff seems to be in a great hurry. We believe this is because his case is built on media theater, not evidence. We are happy to proceed on an expedited timeline. The sooner this is resolved, the better. Briggs looked stunned. This wasn't the plan. We were supposed to beg for more time. However, Evan continued, if we are proceeding at this accelerated pace, we ask that the court grant expanded discovery, specifically related to the plaintiff's financial history, to establish the clear pattern of behavior and financial motive that forms the basis of our defense. It was a trap, and Briggs had just walked right into it. He'd asked for speed, but Evan had just used that request to open the one door Briggs desperately needed to keep shut. Doyle looked at her calendar. Motion to expedite is granted. Hearing will be in 1 week. And Mr. Calder? Your motion for expanded discovery is also granted, given the nature of the allegations. Get your subpoenas out by 5 p.m. today. We walked out. Briggs was apoplectic. Vanessa, who had shown up for the cameras, was busy performing for them, hugging Greg on the courthouse steps, the photo op. Greg and I are united, her Instagram post read, posted just minutes later. Family is forever, even when it's hard. Blessed family first legacy. The comment section was a war zone. She's a gold digger. No, the granddaughter is an ungrateful monster. She works for the government. The internet had chosen its sides. I ignored it. I was already on my laptop in Evan's office, drafting. Subpoena ducis tecum, I typed. To Vanessa Hale, DBAV's boutique, all tax records, corporate filings, invoices, and records of consulting fees from 2002 to present. Tessa served the subpoena an hour later. We got the records 2 days later, and there it was, page after page of invoices. Consulting fees paid by her own boutique to a shell corporation she controlled. The amounts were random until I matched them to the dates in Arthur's ledger. $2,500 every month. It wasn't just extortion, it was money laundering. She was billing her own failed business for services to justify the cash bleed from my grandfather, creating a paper trail to hide his gifts as income. My phone buzzed, a text from Tessa. New problem. Anonymous comment on the Ledger article. I used to work for the DA's office. Gabby Thompson is the most ungrateful stepdaughter. She was always jealous of Vanessa. It's getting a lot of traction. Can you trace it? I typed back. A minute later. Already did. IP address traces back to a computer registered to the law offices of Colton Briggs. It's his paralegal's burner account. I closed my laptop. The public temperature was rising. They were throwing everything at me. Smear campaigns, fake psych reports, family betrayal, procedural ambushes. I opened my grandfather's leather file. I took out a fresh legal pad and wrote at the top of the page. 1. Boutique invoices, tax fraud, money laundering. 2. Briggs burner account, ethics violation. 3. Greg's DA visit, witness intimidation. 4. Vanessa's 60-40 offer, on tape. I looked at the list. The noise outside was deafening, but the evidence was quiet, and it was perfect. I wrote one more line at the bottom of the page. Do not get swept up in the waves. Stick to the evidence. Evan Calder's office became our war room. The expedited timeline meant no sleep. Just strategy, fueled by endless cups of bitter, stale coffee. We papered the glass walls of his main conference room with giant whiteboards, turning the space into a visible map of our case. Evan, energized by an indignation that matched my own, drew 4 columns: financials, witness testimony, pattern of behavior, legal precedent. This isn't a will contest, Gabby, he said, the blue markers squeaking in protest. This is a long-term elder fraud and undue influence case. We are not defending your grandfather's will. We are prosecuting their claim. That single shift in perspective locked everything into place. We weren't on defense. We were on offense. The first bricks in our wall were the expert witnesses. Briggs was attacking Arthur's mind. We would build a fortress around it. I brought in Dr. Priya Menon, the head of neurology at Lakefield General. She was crisp, clinical, and utterly unimpressed by the legal circus. She had been Arthur's consulting neurologist for 5 years, ever since a minor bout of vertigo. Judge Doyle knows me. Evan, Dr. Menon said during our prep call. Her voice clipped and precise. I do not get rattled. Judge Whitlow was my patient, and he was a colleague I respected. He personally requested a mini mental state exam every 6 months. Just to keep the bastards honest, Priya, he'd say. Her affidavit was a cannonball. On April 4th of this year, 6 months prior to his passing, and a full 2 months after the final codicil to his will was executed, Judge Arthur Whitlow scored a 29 out of a possible 30 on his MMSE. He lost 1 point for being unable to recall one of 3 unrelated words after a 5-minute delay. For context, I have colleagues in their 40s who might struggle to score a 29. Next, Thomas Beale, the forensic accountant Tessa had found for us. He was a quiet, unassuming man in wire-rimmed glasses who found poetry in spreadsheets. He took the ledger I'd found and transformed it from a simple logbook into a devastating visual narrative. He charted 22 years of financial transfers. It was a predator's heartbeat, rendered in a line graph. There was the steady, rhythmic baseline, $2,500, every single month. Then, there were the spikes. Here, Beale said in our conference room, pointing to the screen with a laser. March 2005, this corresponds to the public bankruptcy filing for Ms. Hale's first boutique. 2 weeks later, a $10,000 emergency loan from Judge Whitlow. Here, 2011. Her online luxury import venture dissolves. The very next month, the requests spike to $5,000, and the largest spike, here, 2017. This corresponds to Mr. Greg Thompson being laid off from his consulting job. The Cabo trip for family bonding request comes in, followed by a debt consolidation request for $20,000. He clicked to the next slide. Every single professional or financial failure on their part corresponds, almost to the day, with a major, non-scheduled withdrawal from Judge Whitlow. The pattern is 100% consistent. The experts established the how, the lay witnesses would establish the why. Arthur's old judicial clerk, a formidable woman named Diane Rollins, came forward after hearing about the Ledger article. Judge Doyle was his clerk and she told Evan, her voice sharp. Long before me. They respected each other immensely. This nonsense about his mind. She sniffed. It's slander, plain and simple. She produced a video file from her phone. This was from the judicial retirement luncheon. 5 months ago. This was after he signed the final update to his will. The video showed Arthur on a small dais, laughing. A colleague handed him that morning's New York Times crossword. Let's see if the old man still got it, someone joked. The camera zoomed in real time. Arthur completed the entire Saturday puzzle, in ink, in under 15 minutes. He'd passed it back with a smile. Then, Marta Alvarez. Her written affidavit was a meticulous daily log of Arthur's life, but her deposition would be the thing that dismantled them. Evan prepped her. Marta, how many times did you see Vanessa Hale in the house in the last 10 years? Marta, a woman of profound, quiet dignity, did not hesitate. At the house, Mr. Calder? Perhaps 8 times? Yes, I believe 8. I remember because he would tell me to make the weak coffee. He did not want them to stay long. How long would these visits last? Never more than 20 minutes. Never. They would speak quietly. Then they would speak loudly. Then she would leave. Mr. Gregg. He always looked at the floor. She always looked at the paintings. And every time, Mr. Calder. She left with one of his personal envelopes, the kind he kept the house checks in. Finally, Samuel Ortiz, the bank manager. He was terrified of being dragged into a lawsuit, but he was more terrified of disrespecting Judge Whitlow's memory. He agreed to testify. He would state, under oath, that Vanessa Hale had appeared 4 days before Arthur's death, that she had presented an unsigned medical power of attorney, that she had demanded immediate access to all accounts, claiming Arthur was not lucid, and that he, Samuel, had called Arthur directly, who had answered on the second ring. And what did Judge Whitlow say? Evan asked. He said, Samuel read from his notes. Samuel, thank you for your diligence. Ms. Hale has no authority over my accounts, and she never will. Please log this call, and note that I am of perfectly sound mind. Now, how is your daughter's college application coming along? It's beautiful, Evan said. Late one night, staring at the whiteboard, we have the medical expert, the financial expert, and the eyewitnesses. We have the motive, the means, the opportunity. Now, we just need the law to tie it all together. He'd found that, too. Harrington versus Bellamy, a 2012 case from the North Shore County Supreme Court. It was a perfect, tailor-made precedent. It established the pattern of conduct principle in undue influence claims. It ruled that a challenger didn't need to prove one single, specific event of coercion. The court could, and should, consider a long-term, sustained campaign of isolation, emotional manipulation, and financial dependency. Briggs will argue that Arthur was a brilliant judge, so he couldn't be influenced. Evans strategized, pacing. We'll use Harrington to argue that's why the campaign had to be so subtle and last for 22 years. It wasn't a sudden break. It was a slow, deliberate erosion. He wasn't a fool. He was a hostage. My job was the hardest. I had to prepare my own testimony. I was the executrix, the defendant, and the primary beneficiary. I practiced in front of a mirror in Evan's office, my own reflection looking back at me, cold and unfamiliar. Vanessa, she always made me feel, I started. No. Evan cut me off from his chair. Stop. No, she made me feel. No, I believe. No, it hurt when. You are not his granddaughter on that stand. Gabby, you are not a victim. You are a prosecutor. You are a fact witness. Give Judge Doyle the data. Let her feel the anger. I took a breath. I tried again. On June 10th, 2018, I received a birthday card. The card was for a special nephew. Inside was a $20 bill. On June 11th, 2018, my grandfather's ledger shows a $5,000 transfer to Vanessa Hale for online venture capital. Good, Evan nodded. Cold, just the facts. The day before the hearing, my desk phone rang at the DA's office. It was DA Jordan Pike. Gabriella, he said. his voice all business. Your leave of absence is approved, effective immediately. For as long as you need, it will be with full pay. Sir, thank you. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, he cut in. I'm also sending a letter via courier to Judge Doyle, to be provided to your counsel. It confirms that the North Shore County District Attorney's Office holds you in the highest professional regard and that your work has been exemplary. The letter also states that we are aware of the frivolous, anonymous complaints made against you and consider them a failed attempt to intimidate a member of this office. Good luck, Counselor. The line clicked dead. He had just handed me an ironclad shield. An hour later, Tessa Green called. Got a hot tip, she said, her voice a low growl. From a paralegal who rage-quit Briggs's firm last month. Remember the Johnson case? The one he dragged out and forced a settlement on? The one from his file, I said, where he bled the executrix dry. Yeah, his primary tactic was a motion for a mandatory psychological evaluation. He fabricated a report from a family friend, leaked it to the press, and got the judge to bite. It delayed probate by 18 months. The other side ran out of money and caved. My stomach turned to ice. It's the same play. He did it to me. He leaked the assessment to the ledger. He had my father come to Pike's office. Exactly. He was hoping Doyle would see the leak and grant his motion in court. When she didn't, he sent your dad in as Plan B. He's trying to get you benched on a psych hold. Gabby. But now we know it's his signature move. It's a pattern. Tessa, this is it. This is how we shut him down. We can preempt the motion. Go get him, she said, and hung up. That night, I was in Arthur's library. The house was sold, but the new owners had graciously given me until the end of the week. The room was empty, echoing. All that was left was his massive mahogany desk, which I was keeping. I was packing the last of its drawers when my fingers brushed against the small, recessed latch on the side panel. I'd forgotten. I pressed it. The false panel clicked open, revealing the secret compartment. Inside were the items I'd found before, the wax-sealed letter for the probate court, which Evan had already filed, the USB drive with the audio of Vanessa's phone calls, and the third item, the small, white business envelope. On the front, in his hand, Gabriella, open when they attack you. They're attacking. Grandpa, I whispered. My hands were shaking. I tore it open. There was no letter, just another, newer USB drive and a small, folded piece of yellow legal paper. On the paper was a 24-character alphanumeric password. I plugged the drive into my laptop. The drive was encrypted. I typed in the password. A single video file appeared on the desktop. I double-clicked it. My grandfather's face filled the screen. He looked tired, thinner than I had seen him, but his eyes were blazing. They were his courtroom eyes. He was in his study. He held up a copy of the Lakefield Ledger to the camera. The date was visible. May 30th, 6 months ago. This is Arthur Whitlow, he said, his voice a low, steady rumble. It is May 30th, 2024. I am of sound mind and body, and I am recording this testament of my own free will, with no one else present. My hand flew to my mouth. I am recording this, he continued, looking directly into the lens, because I am not a fool. I know exactly what will happen the moment I am gone. My son, Greg, is a weak man, and his wife, Vanessa Hale, is a predator. The clinical, brutal assessment was like a slap. For 22 years, she has extorted money from me, using my son as leverage and my granddaughter as a bargaining chip. I have paid it. I paid it not out of love, but as a fee to keep them away from Gabriella, a fee to ensure their chaos did not infect her life. A tear rolled down my cheek, hot and sudden. They will now try to claim I was senile. They will claim I was incompetent. They will claim that Gabriella, my heir, my defender, my daughter in every way that matters, manipulated me. He leaned closer to the camera. As proof of their intentions, I am holding a document. He held up a single sheet of paper. This is a copy of an unsigned medical power of attorney. Vanessa Hale brought this to me on May 28th, 2 days ago, and asked me to sign it. To make things easier, I refused. She will likely claim I gave it to her, or that I was too addled to sign. She is lying. He put the paper down. I have left all my financial evidence for Gabby. She is a prosecutor. She will know what to do with it. But I am leaving this final word, for the court. In the event that they attack her character, in the event that they lie about my mind, I want this presented. His eyes seemed to find me, to see me right through the screen, sitting alone in his empty, echoing library. If they are lying, Gabriella, you show this to the court. You let me speak for myself. They want to contest my will? Let them contest me, face to face. I am Arthur Whitlow, and I am of perfectly sound mind. The screen went black. I sat there for a long time, the only sound my own breathing. He had known. He had seen every move, every angle. He had anticipated the competency claims, the lies, the attacks on me. He had even prepared his own cross-examination, from beyond the grave. I closed the laptop. I put the small USB drive in the secure pocket of my briefcase. Next to the audio files of Vanessa, next to Beale's financial charts, and next to Dr. Menon's report. Colton Briggs thought he was playing against a grieving granddaughter. He was wrong. He was about to play against Judge Arthur Whitlow, and this was the final weapon. This was the checkmate. The Sunday before the hearing was cold. The air so still it felt like the world was holding its breath. Maple Grove Cemetery was quiet. The only sound, the mournful rustle of old leaves skittering across the grass. I had come alone. This was my ritual, my one moment of true, unobserved grief. I placed the bouquet of white lilies, his favorite, clean and sharp, like his judicial robes, at the base of the massive granite headstone. Arthur Whitlow, beloved husband, father, grandfather. Beneath it, Nora Whitlow, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, together, as they always should have been. I was kneeling, straightening a stray stem, when I heard it. The crunch of gravel, not the slow, respectful tread of a mourner. This was a staccato, impatient sound, the sound of expensive shoes on a path they felt was beneath them. A cloud of perfume, heavy and sweet, arrived first. Gardenias and something else. Entitlement. Gabriella, darling, I had a feeling I'd find you here. I didn't look up. I didn't have to. Vanessa Hale's voice, a syrupy, rehearsed melody of concern, was unmistakable. I finished with the flowers, taking my time, letting the silence stretch. I would not be rushed, not here. This is all so unnecessary, she sighed, stepping onto the grass, her heels sinking slightly into the soft turf. All this fighting, it's not what he would have wanted. I finally stood, brushing the damp dirt from my knees. I turned to face her. She was a vision of calculated grief. A brand-new, camel-colored cashmere coat was draped over her shoulders. Black designer sunglasses hid her eyes. Her blonde hair was perfectly blown out. In her manicured hand, she held a single, long-stemmed red rose, so garish and out of place it looked like a prop. And, of course, 10 feet behind her, shifting from foot to foot like a man waiting for a bus, was my father, Greg. He was wearing a suit that was too large, his gaze fixed on a distant mausoleum. "Hello, Vanessa," I said. My voice was flat. "Hello, Dad." My father gave a weak, miserable wave, his hand dropping as soon as I made eye contact. "Gabby," Vanessa said, stepping closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Let's end this. Please, this is tearing your father apart." My father, who hadn't spoken to me in 3 weeks, except to try and have me fired, flinched. "Blood is still family. Gabriella," Vanessa said, taking another step. She was trying to get inside my space, to create a false intimacy. "We're all that's left. We can stop this, right now. Just us. We can walk away from the lawyers, from the court. We can just be a family." She was trying to pull me off the legal battlefield, the one where I had all the weapons, and onto the emotional one, the one where she believed I was weak. I looked at her, at the perfect coat, at the red rose, at the man who was my father cowering behind her, and I felt nothing. The part of me that had ached for them, the 6-year-old girl on the porch, had finally, blessedly, died. Family? I said. My voice was as cold as the November air. Family is who shows up. Vanessa, family is who holds your hand at your grandmother's funeral, not the person who complains about their dress. Family is who is there for the debate tournaments and the graduations. I took a step toward her. She took an involuntary step back. Family, I said, my voice dropping, is not a monthly invoice for $2,500 for 22 years. The mask shattered. The carefully constructed, grieving, warm-hearted stepmother vanished. In her place was the woman I'd heard on my grandfather's audio files, cornered, vicious, desperate. "You ungrateful little bitch," she hissed. The sound of the slap was a gunshot in the cemetery silence. It was sharp, shocking, and it echoed off the nearby stones. My head snapped to the side. A white-hot flash exploded across my cheek, and my ear rang with a sudden, high-pitched whine. The smell of her perfume, now overpowering, clung to my skin. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just stood there for one long second, the heat blooming on my face. Then, I did what I was trained to do. I took one precise, measured step back, out of her reach. My hand, perfectly steady, went into my coat pocket. Vanessa was still breathing hard, her hand raised, her face a mask of triumphant, uncontrolled rage. My father was frozen, his mouth open in a perfect O of pathetic shock. I pulled out my smartphone. I unlocked it, I opened the camera application, I reversed the view to selfie mode, I raised it to my face, angling it to catch the light. Click. I took one high-resolution photograph of the bright red, 5-fingered handprint that was already blooming on my left cheek. Click. I took another, angling slightly to capture the swelling that was just beginning. Click. A third, for good measure. Then, I closed the camera app. I opened a new note. I hit the audio-to-text transcription button. "Note," I said, and my voice was perfectly clear, perfectly calm. Sunday, November 3rd, 10:32 in the morning. Maple Grove Cemetery. Plot B47. Assaulted by Vanessa Hale. I saved the note. I opened my email. I attached the 3 photographs and the audio note. I sent it to Evan Calder, with the subject line, "Evidence. Physical assault. 10:32 a.m." I slid the phone back into my pocket. The entire sequence had taken less than 20 seconds. Vanessa was staring at me, her rage dissolving into a dawning, horrified confusion. She had been prepared for tears. She had been prepared for a fight. She had not been prepared for discovery. My father finally stumbled forward, his hands flapping uselessly. "Gabby, Vanessa, stop it! Please, just stop! I can't take sides. Let's just all calm down." His eyes, frantic and terrified, were darting around the cemetery. He was looking for witnesses, and he found one. His gaze locked on a young man in a dark jacket, half hidden behind a large oak tree about 50 yards away. The man was holding a camera with a long telephoto lens. The quiet click, click, click of a high-speed shutter, suddenly audible in the silence, confirmed it. He wasn't a birdwatcher. My father looked like he was going to be sick. I looked at him, my cheek throbbing with a dull, steady ache. "You already chose, Dad," I said, my voice devoid of any heat. "You chose not to have a side. That is your side." I turned my gaze from him, past Vanessa, to the cool gray granite of Arthur's headstone. I pointed to the carved letters. "He did, though," I said, my voice quiet, but it carried in the still air. "He chose his side a long time ago. He always chose. He chose the truth." Vanessa's eyes followed my father's. She saw the photographer. Pure, undiluted panic washed over her face. She just realized, in that one terrible second, what she had done. She had not just slapped a stepdaughter, she had, on camera, physically assaulted the lead prosecutor of the North Shore County DA's office, one day before a high-profile civil hearing. "Get me out of here," she hissed at my father, grabbing his arm. "Get me to the car, now." She turned and practically ran, her expensive heels digging into the turf, pulling my father along with her. She stumbled, catching her cashmere coat on a low-hanging branch, ripping a small tear. She didn't stop. The photographer's lens followed her the entire way, capturing the frantic, guilty retreat. It captured her, shoving my father toward the driver's side door of their Escalade. And it captured, in perfect, sharp focus, the massive, brand-new, canary yellow diamond ring on her left hand, the ring she had been wearing ever since Arthur's death. A ring whose provenance, I was sure, Thomas Beale could now trace. I stayed until they were gone. Then I calmly picked up my empty flower wrapper, walked to my car, and drove home. That evening, I sat in my apartment with an ice pack on my face. My phone buzzed. A text from Tessa Green. "Got it. Full video. Cemetery security camera. High angle. Clear audio of the slap. It's cinematic. Your reaction was perfect. The freelance guy was ours. His photos are exquisite. The ring is a nice touch." I opened my grandfather's leather-bound file and made a new entry in my own log. Sunday, 10:32 a.m. Assaulted by plaintiff. Evidence secured. I added a note to myself. Keep calm. Let the evidence speak. The attack from their side came just after 10 p.m. A desperate, preemptive strike. A blog post on the Lakefield Ledger site from an anonymous family friend. Heartbreaking scene at cemetery. Grieving Gabriella Thompson loses control. Attacks stepmother. It was a good try. It was also, fatally, too late. Evan Calder released our evidence, not to the press. He sent 2 things, via a midnight courier, to Judge Doyle's chambers, a motion for a temporary restraining order, and a motion for sanctions against Vanessa Hale and her counsel, Colton Briggs. The evidence attached was simple: the security camera footage, unedited, the high-resolution photographs of my face, and the affidavit from the photographer. The video went public an hour later, released by Tessa to a national newswire. It had no audio, but it didn't need it. It showed me, standing still. It showed Vanessa, agitated, stepping forward. It showed her winding up and striking me. It showed my calm, methodical, 20-second response. It showed her frantic, guilty retreat. The original blog post was deleted within 5 minutes. The internet, which had been a war zone of opinions, became a firing squad aimed in one direction. Colton Briggs, for the first time, was silent. His office issued a terse no comment, the Lakefield Ledger, facing a second, much larger lawsuit, printed a full front-page retraction of their original manipulated legacy story, and a formal apology to me. The narrative was no longer unstable granddaughter. It was abusive, gold-digging stepmother assaults prosecutor. The local news, now smelling blood, cornered Vanessa outside a coffee shop. A reporter, holding up a printout of one of the photos, shoved a microphone in her face. "Ms. Hale, is it true you assaulted your stepdaughter? And can you explain the large, red abrasions on your own hand, visible in this photo?" In her blind rage, she had not only hit me, she had connected with the sharp granite corner of Arthur's headstone. She stared at the photo, her face white. She had no answer. She just fled, shoving the camera out of her way. I turned off the television. The anger in my stomach had settled into a cold, hard stone. The last, lingering shred of familial obligation, the ghost of the girl on the porch, was gone. It had been slapped out of me. This wasn't a family dispute. It wasn't a tragedy. It was a case, and the battle line was no longer just in the courtroom. It had been drawn, in red, on my face, and I was, finally, completely, ready to fight. The morning of the final preparatory hearing, Courtroom 3B was a pressure cooker. The video of the cemetery slap had been playing on a 24-hour loop on every news station in Lakefield. The gallery was standing room only, and as he had promised. District Attorney Jordan Pike was sitting in the second row, his arms crossed, his presence a silent, immovable fact. My cheek was a sickly yellow-purple, a dull, throbbing reminder under a thick layer of concealer. I didn't hide it. I wanted Judge Doyle to see it. Colton Briggs was not the same man he had been a week ago. His bespoke suit looked rumpled, his slick confidence replaced by the sharp, brittle energy of a cornered animal. Vanessa sat beside him, wearing a black veil as if she were at a funeral, which, in a way, she was. My father, Greg, was seated 3 chairs away from them, a man in exile, staring at the floor. Judge Doyle entered, and the room went silent. She looked at the packed gallery, at D.A. Pike, and then her eyes settled on my face. She held her gaze for a solid 3 seconds, an unspoken acknowledgement. "We are here," she began, her voice like chipping ice, "to finalize the schedule for the hearing on the merits. But first, this court is in receipt of a motion for a temporary restraining order and a motion for sanctions, filed by the respondent." Her eyes flicked to Vanessa, and based on the evidence, including the respondent's face, I am granting that restraining order, effective immediately. Ms. Hale, you will remain 500 feet away from Ms. Thompson at all times. Do you understand me? Vanessa nodded, mute. Briggs shot to his feet, a man trying to reverse the tide. "Your Honor, that unfortunate incident, which my client deeply regrets, is precisely why we must proceed with our original motion. It is, in fact, the very proof of our claim." Doyle's eyebrow raised. "Your proof, Mr. Briggs, that your client is violent? That my client was provoked," he almost yelled. "Provoked by an unstable, emotionally manipulative individual who is unwell. The respondent's coldness, her behavior, it is a sign of deep-seated trauma. We are demanding, a mandatory psychological evaluation of Ms. Thompson before this goes one step further. We cannot have a person in this condition executing an estate." It was his last bullet. He was sticking to the script Tessa had warned me about, even though the stage was on fire. Evan Calder stood slowly. He smoothed his tie. He looked at Briggs, then at me, then at the judge. "Your Honor," Evan said, his voice a calm counterpoint to Briggs's histrionics, "we welcome Mr. Briggs's motion because it is the final, predictable, and desperate piece of his playbook. A playbook this county's highest court has already identified as procedurally abusive." He picked up a legal brief. "I draw the court's attention to Harrington v. Bellamy, 2012, a North Shore County Supreme Court case. It ruled that using dilatory tactics, specifically fabricated claims of psychological instability and weaponizing the media to delay probate and bleed an estate, constitutes a pattern of bad faith litigation. Mr. Briggs is not arguing the merits of his case. He is attempting to win by bankrupting my client." Evan turned slightly, gesturing to the file Tessa had given him. "Mr. Briggs has used this exact tactic, a leaked psych report, followed by a motion for a mandatory evaluation, in 3 prior estate contests, Johnson, Price, and Barlow. He is not practicing law. He is running a con. We ask the court to dismiss this motion with prejudice and to consider sanctions for this flagrant abuse of process." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Briggs was ashen. We had just shown Judge Doyle his entire hand. Doyle's gaze was sharp enough to cut steel. "Mr. Briggs, this is a very serious allegation. You claim Ms. Thompson is unstable. You leaked a fraudulent assessment. You sent her father to her employer. What is the source of this profound, actionable concern? Be specific, and I remind you, you are an officer of this court." Briggs was trapped. He knew his report was a fake. He knew my father's attempt had failed. He sputtered. We have confidential sources, Your Honor. Sources who have indicated their profound concern for Miss Thompson's well-being." "What sources?" Doyle pressed. We have information from within the North Shore County District Attorney's office itself, Briggs blurted out, his final, desperate gamble. He was trying to imply that my own colleagues thought I was a danger. It was the wrong move. In the second row, Jordan Pike stood up. He was not counsel, he was a spectator. But when the sitting district attorney stands in a courtroom, everyone, including the judge, stops. Your Honor, Pike said, his voice filling the room, not with volume, but with authority. Jordan Pike, for the district attorney's office, forgive the intrusion, but as counsel has just maligned my office, I feel compelled to speak. Doyle nodded. Mr. Pike, the court recognizes you. Mr. Briggs's sources in my office consist of one man, Mr. Greg Thompson, the respondent's father, who appeared unannounced in my office last week. He made baseless allegations in an obvious attempt to have his daughter suspended from duty. He was informed, in my presence, that his claims were unsubstantiated, frivolous, and had no merit. Pike walked forward and handed a document to the bailiff, who passed it to the bench. Furthermore, as Mr. Briggs is so concerned with the professional integrity of my prosecutor, I am formally submitting this letter, signed by me, and an accompanying affidavit. It confirms that Gabriella Thompson is an assistant district attorney in exemplary standing, that her casework is unimpeachable, and that the district attorney's office considers these attacks on her character to be a textbook, and frankly, pathetic, case of witness intimidation related to this civil matter. We stand by our prosecutor 100%. He looked directly at Briggs. Any further claims about sources in my office will be met with a formal complaint to the state bar. Pike sat down. It was a public execution. Colton Briggs was finished. He just stood there, his mouth slightly open, his entire case having disintegrated in less than 60 seconds. Well, Mr. Briggs? Doyle asked, her voice laced with acid. Briggs, his face crimson, sank into his chair. We withdraw the motion for evaluation. I'll bet you do, Doyle muttered. Let's move on. Evidence. Briggs, scrambling to save any part of his case, tried to pivot. Your Honor, then we must move to exclude the respondent's so-called emotional evidence, the birthday cards, the stories of her childhood. They are purely prejudicial. They are designed to inflame the court, to poison the well against my client, who was a loving. He couldn't even finish the sentence. I smiled, a small, cold smile. I stood up. Your Honor, Gabriella Thompson, we agree. Briggs looked stunned. My legal team and I continued, would rather not try this case on emotion. We are happy to set aside the birthday cards, the bulk of our evidence, and I tapped the stack of binders in front of me, is financial and medical. Doyle nodded, a grim smile of her own. I see that the motion to exclude emotional evidence is granted. However, she held up a finger, the court will be admitting the forensic accountant's behavioral chart as evidence. It is not emotional. It is a financial pattern. And I will be admitting the housekeeper's daily journals, not for their feelings, but as evidence of routine and habit under Section 803 of the State Evidence Code. That is all. The rest of the hearing was a rout. Evan, sensing blood in the water, went for the kill. Your Honor, he said, dropping a new, thick binder on the table, we have received the data from the plaintiff's subpoenaed cell phone. As per your order, it shows a fascinating pattern. For example, a string of text messages from Ms. Hale to her public relations firm, Amber and Company, dated just minutes before her tearful interview with the Lakefield Ledger. He read from the page. Text from Vanessa Hale, 8:13 a.m. Tell them to meet me at the east entrance. I'm bringing the framed photo. Make sure they get my good side. Text from PR firm, 8:14 a.m. Perfect. Remember, Anguish, you are the victim. Text from Vanessa Hale, 8:14 a.m. Obviously, get me a goddamn tissue. A collective gasp went through the gallery. Vanessa sank so low in her chair she almost disappeared. Briggs, in a move of pure, frantic desperation, stood one last time. "Your Honor, we cannot proceed. This is a media lynching. We are filing an immediate, temporary appeal with the appellate division to stay these proceedings." He was trying to punt, to get this case away from Judge Doyle, who clearly despised him. Doyle didn't even blink. "You do that, Mr. Briggs." She looked at her watch. "It's 11:03 in the morning." At 2:15 p.m., after a long recess, Evan's phone buzzed. He looked at it and smiled. "Your Honor," he said, as the hearing resumed, "the appellate division has denied Mr. Briggs's motion. Their ruling consists of a single word, denied, for lack of any discernible merit or urgency." It was over. Briggs had nowhere left to run. The evidence piled up. Tessa Green's forensic IT report, showing 22 years of emails from Vanessa to Arthur. The subject line was almost always the same. "Monthly? Same as usual?" Or, "A small favor." Samuel Ortiz, the banker, provided the final nail. ATM security footage. It showed Greg and Vanessa, together, at a drive-up ATM. They were laughing. Vanessa was holding up a stack of $20 bills to the camera. The date and timestamp on the footage was exactly 45 minutes after Vanessa had sent an email to Arthur claiming they were too broke to afford the gas to come visit him in Riverside. Judge Doyle closed her file. The sound was a definitive thud. "This court has seen and heard enough," she said. "The games are over. This hearing on the merits will begin tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. We will proceed for 3 consecutive days, or until this matter is concluded. And let me be clear. Mr. Briggs, Ms. Hale." She stared at them. "Any further attempts to play this out in the press, any more leaks, any more anonymous comments, and I will hold you in contempt of court, personally. Am I understood?" "Yes, Your Honor," Briggs mumbled. As the courtroom emptied, the press swarmed them. Vanessa, ever the performer, grabbed Greg's hand. She forced a smile onto her face, a grotesque, distorted grimace of a smile. She held his hand up, staring defiantly at the cameras. "Family," she said, her voice cracking, "is forever." A photographer snapped the picture. It was the last, desperate shot from a sinking ship. I ignored them. I walked back to the defendant's table. Evan was already there, organizing our binders. They were marked by color. Red for financials, blue for medical, yellow for witnesses. I pulled my cell phone from my pocket. I looked at the notifications, the hundreds of angry messages, the gossip alerts, the missed calls from numbers I didn't know. I held the power button down. The screen went black. I slid the phone into my briefcase and zipped it shut. I turned to Evan and pointed at the red binder. "Let's review Beale's testimony one more time," I said. The noise was over. The final sprint had begun. Day 1 of the hearing began. The air in courtroom 3B was not just tense, it was electric. The restraining order was in effect, so Vanessa and I were seated at tables separated by the maximum possible distance. She had abandoned the black veil for a demure, high-necked navy blue dress. She looked like a Puritan. My father was not in the room. His presence was not required until he was called to the stand. Evan Calder stood, buttoning his jacket. "Your Honor, the respondent calls Dr. Priya Menon to the stand." Dr. Menon walked to the witness box with a brisk, no-nonsense stride. She was all sharp angles and sharper intelligence. She took the oath and fixed her gaze on Evan. "Dr. Menon," Evan began, "you were Judge Arthur Whitlow's consulting neurologist for how long?" 5 years, Dr. Menon replied, her voice clear. "I saw him twice a year, and more frequently in his final 6 months, at his request." "At his request? Why?" "Judge Whitlow was a man of profound intellect," she said. "He was aware of his age, and he was aware of the interpersonal conflicts surrounding him. He explicitly requested a mini-mental state exam at every visit. His words to me were, 'I want a baseline, doctor. I want a record. I will not have my legacy litigated by charlatans.'" A murmur went through the room. Briggs shot to his feet. Objection, hearsay, and speculation. Sustained as to the charlatan's comment, Doyle said, though the corner of her mouth twitched. The rest is admissible as to the patient's stated reason for seeking medical treatment. Proceed, Mr. Calder. Thank you, Doctor. What were the results of those exams? They were consistently, remarkably high. His final exam was administered on April 4th of this year, 2 months after he signed his final will. And his score? 29 out of 30, Dr. Menon said. He lost 1 point for being unable to recall the word pencil after a 5-minute delay. Frankly, I'm not certain I would score a 29 on a bad day. His mind was, in my professional opinion, sharper, clearer, and more legally capable than any mind I've had the pleasure of treating. Thank you, Doctor. No further questions. Briggs tried to cross-examine her. He tried to trap her in medical jargon, suggesting that a high score could mask underlying delusions. Dr. Menon simply stared at him over her glasses. Mr. Briggs, a high-scoring individual can, of course, hold a personal prejudice. They cannot, however, be deluded into believing they are signing a check for a car when it is, in fact, a will. Judge Whitlow was, in my expert opinion, legally and medically sound. He was, to use a lay term, 100% there. He had no response. He let her go. The respondent calls Thomas Beale, Evans said. Thomas Beale, the forensic accountant, set up his projector. He was the opposite of Dr. Menon, quiet, mousy, and visibly nervous. But when his first slide appeared on the large screen, the courtroom went dead silent. It was the graph, 22 years, rendered in a brutal black line. What we see here, Beale said, his shaky voice gaining strength as he spoke about his work, is a consistent baseline transfer of funds from Judge Whitlow's account to an account controlled by Ms. Hale. This baseline is $2,500 per month for 22 years. The total, just for this baseline payment, is $660,000. The number hung in the air. $660,000. The gallery inhaled as one. I looked at Vanessa. Her face was pale, her knuckles white as she gripped her pen. But the baseline is not the whole story, Beale continued, clicking to the next slide. The graph now had jagged red peaks shooting up. These peaks represent emergency requests. Each one, my analysis shows, corresponds directly to a public record of financial distress on the part of Ms. Hale or Mr. Thompson. He pointed to the largest spike. This peak, a transfer of $20,000, occurred on July 10, 2017. This was 1 week after Ms. Hale's V's Boutique was served with a final eviction notice for non-payment of rent. Mr. Beale, Evans said, did you also examine the records from Ms. Hale's Boutique? I did, specifically, her invoices. A new slide appeared. It showed 2 documents, side by side. One was an email from Vanessa to Arthur, dated August 1st, 2018. It read, Dearest Arthur, I am so embarrassed to ask, but the business is in a terrible slump. I am just in a hardship. I need help. The other document was a credit card receipt from Vanessa's personal card, dated August 2nd, 2018. The day after the transfer from Arthur hit her account. It was from a high-end luxury goods store. The purchase, 1 Dior book tote, blue oblique. The price, $3,500. Objection, Briggs roared, leaping to his feet. This is prejudicial. It's character assassination. How my client spends her money is not relevant. Overruled, Mr. Briggs, Judge Doyle said, her voice flat. It is highly relevant. A request for hardship funds, followed by the purchase of a luxury handbag, goes directly to the heart of the plaintiff's credibility and motive. The relevance far outweighs any prejudice. The evidence is admitted. Beale continued for another 30 minutes, dismantling their finances, piece by piece. When he stepped down, the narrative of the grieving stepmother had been replaced by the forensic accountant's chart. The respondent calls Marta Alvarez. Marta was terrified, but as she took the oath, She looked at me, and her spine straightened. "Marta," Evan said gently, "you were Judge Whitlow's housekeeper for how long?" 31 years, sir." "In the last 10 years, how often did Ms. Vanessa Hale visit the home?" Marta pursed her lips. "To the house? Not to the hospital, but to the house?" She paused, as if counting. "I would say 8 times. Yes, 8 times in 10 years. I remember, because he would be in a bad mood for a day after." "And how long did these visits last?" "Oh, never long. 10, maybe 20 minutes. She did not like to sit." "And did you observe anything about these visits?" "Yes," Marta said firmly. "She would talk. He would listen. He would go to his desk. He would take one of his envelopes, the kind he paid me with, and he would give it to her, and then she would leave." The respondent calls Samuel Ortiz. The bank manager was next. He testified clearly, reading from his own log. He detailed the 4 visits from Vanessa. He detailed the final attempt, 4 days before Arthur died, to gain access to his entire portfolio with the unsigned medical power of attorney. "She was," Ortiz said, "very insistent. She said, 'He is not lucid. I am in charge now, but I had a duty, so I called him.'" "And what was Judge Whitlow's state?" "He was angry," Ortiz said, "but he was 100% lucid. He told me, 'Ms. Hale has no authority. Log this call, and thank you for your diligence. Samuel.'" The morning had been a relentless series of hammer blows. By the time we broke for lunch, Vanessa's case was in ruins. The afternoon was reserved for one witness, my father. Greg Thompson was sworn in. He looked like a man walking to his own execution. He sat down and refused to look at me. He refused to look at Evan. He stared at a point on the wall just above Judge Doyle's head. "Mr. Thompson," Evan began, his voice surprisingly gentle, "you are the plaintiff's husband and the respondent's father." "Yes," his voice was a dry croak. "Mr. Thompson, in the last 22 years, how much money, to your knowledge, did your wife receive from your father, Arthur Whitlow?" "I don't remember." "You don't remember? We are talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. You have no memory of this?" I wasn't involved in the finances. That was Vanessa." "I see. Were you aware that your wife was receiving $2,500 every month for 2 decades?" "I don't remember." "You don't remember. Do you remember this?" Evan clicked a button. The large screen lit up with the ATM footage. Greg, in the passenger seat, Vanessa, in the driver's seat, holding up a fan of cash to the camera and laughing. My father's face went white. "That is you, is it not, Mr. Thompson, in that car? The timestamp is August 15th, 2019. This was 45 minutes after your wife emailed your father, claiming you were too broke to afford gas to visit him." I don't remember that specific day." "You don't remember," Evan said, his voice hardening. "Perhaps you remember this." He clicked again, a new audio file. "This is a recording of a call," Evan said, "placed by you, Mr. Thompson, to the office of District Attorney Jordan Pike, just last week." My father's voice, wheedling and frantic, filled the courtroom. "Mr. Pike, I am so worried. My daughter, Gabriella, she's not well. She's unstable. She's been out of control since her grandfather passed. I am genuinely worried about her fitness, her stability." The audio clicked off. The courtroom was tomb silent. D.A. Pike, in the second row, had not moved a muscle. "You were concerned about your daughter's stability," Evan said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But your concern was flexible, wasn't it?" He clicked again. A new document filled the screen. It was an email. From Greg Thompson to my personal email, sent 2 days before the call to D.A. Pike. "Gabby," Evan read aloud, "this has all gone too far. Vanessa is willing to make this right. Just agree to a 60-40 settlement, and we can make all of this go away. It's a good deal for you. Please." Evan walked slowly toward the witness box. Mr. Thompson, on Tuesday, you were offering me a 60-40 settlement, claiming it was a good deal. On Thursday, you were calling my boss, claiming I was unstable and out of control. Which is it? Am I an unstable person who needs medical help? Or am I a rational negotiator to whom you can offer a 60-40 split of an estate you have no claim to? You can't have it both ways. My father just sat there. He had no answer. He just stared, his face a mask of sweat and shame. I don't remember, he whispered. No further questions, Evan said, sitting down. Briggs declined to cross-examine his own client's husband. The press was already typing, their fingers flying. The next morning's headlines were writing themselves. The Ledger reporter, sitting in the front row, was already drafting it. 22-year cash drain pattern. Vanessa was pale, but as we broke for the day, she did not retreat. She stood in the hallway, in front of the cameras. She forced a tear. This is so painful, she choked out. They are twisting everything. I just pray for the truth to come out. She was still performing, but no one was buying it. I walked past the cameras, saying nothing. I kept my hand in my suit pocket. My fingers were curled around the small, hard rectangle of the USB drive. My grandfather's final testament. I hadn't used it. We hadn't needed it. We had just destroyed their entire case with their own words, their own bank records, and their own lies. Judge Doyle set the schedule. We are adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow. Mr. Briggs, we will hear from your witnesses. Be ready. As the room cleared, Evan leaned over to me. The adrenaline was high. We had won the day, completely. That was a massacre, I whispered. It was, Evan agreed. Packing his briefcase, he looked at me, his expression serious. Which is why you can't get complacent. We just used all our heavy artillery. Briggs has nothing left but to lie. He's going to put on a parade of concerned friends and family doctors tomorrow to say Arthur was senile. He tapped my pocket, where the USB drive was. Don't burn that last bullet. Gabby, let them build their entire case. Let them lie, one by one. Tomorrow is the real fight. Tomorrow is when we let the judge have the last word. Day 2. The momentum was ours, and the courtroom knew it. The air was thin. Vanessa's performance of the grieving widow was gone, replaced by a brittle, angry defiance. Colton Briggs looked like a man who hadn't slept, but he was a brawler. He wasn't going down without throwing a few last, desperate punches. The plaintiff calls Judge Reynold Hayes to the stand, Briggs announced, trying to reclaim some dignity. Judge Hayes, a man in his late 80s with a shock of white hair, was helped to the stand. He was followed by 2 more men, both of an advanced age, both former colleagues of my grandfather. Briggs was attempting to build a case based on the sheer weight of their judicial credentials. Judge Hayes, Briggs began, his voice dripping with deference. You knew Judge Whitlow for, 50 years? At least, Hayes said, his voice a papery rustle. Arthur and I came up together, a fine mind. But in recent years, Judge, Briggs said, leaning in, did you notice a change? A change? Well, we all change, son. We get older. But did you notice him becoming, perhaps, more forgetful? More agitated? Confused? Even? Briggs was leading the witness so shamelessly that Evan didn't even bother to object. He just let him dig his own grave. I suppose so, Hayes mused. At the Bar Association gala last year, he seemed distant, not his usual self. Briggs smiled, a small, tight smile. Distant, not his usual self. Thank you. Judge, no further questions. He paraded the other 2 colleagues through. One testified that Arthur had seemed frail at a Christmas party. The other said he had repeated a story at a charity dinner. It was a flimsy, pathetic case built on cocktail party anecdotes. Evan stood up for the cross-examination. Judge Hayes, Evan said, his voice respectful. Thank you for your time. These interactions you described, the Bar Association gala, the Christmas party, the charity dinner, can you tell the court, in the last 5 years, how many times you saw Judge Whitlow outside of these formal, annual social events? Judge Hayes blinked. Outside? Well, I don't recall. We're busy men, retired, but busy. So, these observations, Evan pressed, are based on seeing him, once a year? For a few hours? At a loud party? Well, Hayes said, seeming to shrink in the witness box, I suppose that's accurate. Yes. And at this gala where he seemed distant, Evan continued, were you aware that it was the 2-year anniversary of his wife Nora's passing? I was not, no. Thank you, Judge. No further questions. It was the same for all three. Their evidence of his senility was based on seeing him once a year at a gala. Evan dismantled them in less than 10 minutes. Briggs was sweating now. His parade of esteemed judges had just testified that they barely knew my grandfather. He checked his notes, his face darkening. The plaintiff calls Dr. Alistair Lane, he announced. A man in a cheap suit with a nervous tick in his eye walked to the stand. Dr. Lane, Briggs said, you are a family physician, correct? Yes, I am. And was Judge Arthur Whitlow a patient of yours? He was a patient of the clinic. Yes, I consulted on his file. And in your professional opinion, consulting on his file, what was his state of mind? It was my opinion that he was in a state of cognitive decline, Lane said, reading from a script. He was highly susceptible to undue influence. Judge Doyle leaned forward. Doctor, you consulted on his file? Did you ever personally examine Judge Whitlow? Doctor, Lane's tick became more pronounced. I did not, Your Honor, but I reviewed the notes. You reviewed what notes? Evan asked, standing up for cross. We subpoenaed all of your medical records. We have them here. He held up a single, slim manila folder. There are no notes. There is one file, a patient intake form, filled out by Ms. Vanessa Hale, 2 weeks ago, after Judge Whitlow was already dead. Dr. Lane, did you ever, once, lay eyes on Arthur Whitlow? Doctor, Lane was visibly sweating. No, but based on the information provided by the family. So, you are not a medical expert. Evan cut him off. You are a paid witness, testifying to the medical condition of a man you never met, based on information given to you by the woman who is paying you to testify. Is that correct? Objection, Briggs yelled. Overruled, Judge Doyle snapped, her voice thick with disgust. The witness will answer the question. Doctor, Lane looked from Briggs to Doyle. A man trapped. I was asked to provide an opinion. An opinion you were paid for, Evan finished. Thank you, Doctor. We are done here. Judge Doyle scribbled furiously on her legal pad. Her frown so deep it looked like it was carved in stone. The credibility of the plaintiff's entire case had just evaporated. Briggs, in a move of pure desperation, changed tactics entirely. Your Honor, he said, this case has been so contentious, so cold. I would like to remind the court of the love that was at the center of this family. The plaintiff would like to play a short video, a compilation of happier times. He was trying to poison the jury pool, except there was no jury. He was just trying to poison Judge Doyle. What is this? Doyle asked, clearly annoyed. It is a video, Your Honor, Briggs said, of Ms. Hale with her beloved father-in-law, Arthur, over the years, to show the depth of their relationship. A screen was set up. The video began to play. It was a cheesy, cut-up montage, set to sappy violin music. Vanessa, 20 years younger, laughing in a garden with Arthur. Vanessa, handing Arthur a Christmas present. Vanessa, raising a glass at a barbecue. It was about 30 seconds long. Objection, Evan said, not even standing. Foundation, and this is clearly a highly edited compilation, intended to mislead the court. Where is the raw footage? Where are the original tapes? Mr. Briggs? Doyle asked. This is the video as we have it, Briggs stammered. It was prepared for a family event. So you don't have the original, unedited footage? Doyle asked. You don't have the context for these clips? No, Your Honor. Then it is a campaign commercial, not evidence, Doyle ruled. It is inadmissible. Turn it off. Briggs looked like he had been slapped. He had nothing left. Judge Doyle called a 30-minute recess before the plaintiff's final witness, Vanessa herself. The moment the judge left the bench, the room exploded in chatter. I stood to stretch my legs, and then she was there. Vanessa Hale. She had crossed the courtroom, in direct violation of the restraining order. The bailiff started to move, but I held up a hand. Gabby, honey, she whispered, her eyes wide and frantic. She was no longer performing. This was raw fear. This is insane. This isn't you. I just looked at her. Listen to me, she said, leaning in. You can stop this, right now. You can tell the judge we've reconciled. Just stop Evan. Stop him. We can end this. You get 40%. I'll take 60. But that's fair. I'm his son's wife. It's only fair. She was trying to bribe me, in the middle of the courtroom. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, my face impassive. Say something, she hissed, her panic rising. You're getting 40%. What more do you want? It's just money. His money was just going to be left to someone anyway. Why not us? Why not the family? Why not? His money was just going to be left to someone anyway. It was the most honest thing she had ever said. It was her entire motive, her entire worldview, in one careless sentence. Bailiff, I said, my voice calm. The bailiff was at her elbow in a second. Ms. Hale, you are in violation of a court order. Step away from Ms. Thompson, now. Vanessa's face crumpled. She looked at me, one last time, with pure, unadulterated hatred. Then she was escorted back to her table. I sat down. I put my hand in my pocket. My phone's audio recorder had been running for the entire 2-minute conversation. It was perfectly legal. In our state, only one party needed to consent to a recording. And I had... When Judge Doyle returned, Evan stood up. Your Honor, before the plaintiff calls their final witness, the defense would like to call one brief, supplemental witness. It is a rebuttal witness to the plaintiff's earlier claims of Judge Whitlow's cognitive decline and frailty. We call Ms. Angela Shore. Briggs was on his feet. Objection. We weren't given notice of this witness. It is a rebuttal witness, Your Honor, Evan said calmly. To rebut the testimony of Judge Hayes and Dr. Lane, she is the chief accountant for the Whitlow Charitable Trust. Doyle nodded. I'll allow it. Call your witness. Angela Shore, a sharp woman in her 50s, took the stand. Ms. Shore, Evan began. You manage the Whitlow Trust? Yes. Judge Whitlow was our most generous and most private benefactor. He funded a scholarship program for children, like Ms. Thompson, who were raised by their grandparents. A ripple went through the courtroom. And Judge Whitlow's involvement, Evan asked. Was it hands off? Absolutely not, Angela said, smiling. He was our most meticulous donor. He insisted on reviewing and personally signing every single scholarship approval, every single one. And when was the last time he did this? I have it here. She pulled a document from her briefcase. This is the approval for the fall semester scholarships. It is a 20-page document with a $200,000 disbursement. And when did Judge Whitlow sign it? Evan asked. He signed it, in my presence, on September 12th, she said. 1 week before he passed away, he read all 20 pages. He corrected a typographical error on page 14, and he signed every single page. He was as sharp as he had ever been. The testimony was devastating. It proved he was managing complex financial decisions, lucidly, until his final days. Briggs was finished. He had no cross-examination. He just waved her away. Your Honor, he said, his voice defeated. The plaintiff, rests. It was a stunning admission. He wasn't even going to call Vanessa to the stand. He knew she would be perjuring herself, and he knew we would destroy her. Judge Doyle looked at him. "You rest? Very well." She turned to Evan. "Mr. Calder? Rebuttal?" Evan stood. He looked at me. I gave him the slightest nod. The nod we had agreed upon. It was time. "Your Honor," Evan said, his voice quiet, but it commanded the room. "The defense has one final piece of evidence. It is a video. We believe it is dispositive." "Another video?" Doyle said, annoyed. "Mr. Calder, I just ruled—" "This is not a compilation, Your Honor," Evan said. "This is the final testament of Judge Arthur Whitlow himself." Briggs shot up like a rocket. "Objection! Objection! This is theatrics. It's prejudicial. There's no foundation. It's a deepfake. It's inadmissible." "Your Honor," Evan said calmly, "we have the digital file. It was recorded by Judge Whitlow on his own computer, and we have our digital forensics expert, Mr. Eli Ward, on standby in the hallway, ready to testify, under oath, that the metadata, the encryption, and the digital signature are all original, time-stamped, and completely untampered with. He is prepared to stake his entire professional reputation on its authenticity." Judge Doyle stared at Evan. She looked at Briggs, who was sputtering. She looked at me. "Mr. Ward will not be necessary," she said. "I will review the file myself. If I find any hint of tampering, I will hold you in contempt. Mr. Calder, but I will see it. Bailiff, set up the monitor." The courtroom held its breath. The large screen that had shown the sappy, failed montage was connected to my laptop. The file was queued up. "Play the video," Judge Doyle commanded. Evan hit the spacebar. And there he was, my grandfather. He filled the screen. He was not frail. He was not confused. He was in his study, in his favorite leather chair. He was wearing his judicial robe, and he was staring directly into the camera, staring directly at all of us. "This is Arthur Whitlow," he said, his voice a low, powerful rumble that filled the courtroom. "It is May 30th, 2024. I am of sound mind and body, and I am recording this testament of my own free will." Vanessa let out a small, strangled gasp. It was as if she had seen a ghost. "I am recording this," he continued, his gaze like steel, "because I am not a fool. I know exactly what will happen the moment I am gone. My son, Greg, is a weak man, and his wife, Vanessa Hale, is a predator." Briggs yelled, "Your Honor, this is slander." "Sit down, Mr. Briggs," Doyle snapped. Her eyes writhed to the screen. "He is speaking." "They will claim I was senile." Arthur's voice boomed. "They will claim I was incompetent. They will claim that Gabriella, my heir, my defender, my daughter in every way that matters, manipulated me." He leaned forward, and it felt like he was pushing out of the screen, into the room. "As proof of their intentions, I am holding a document." He held up the unsigned medical power of attorney. "This is a copy of a document Vanessa Hale brought to me on May 28th at 2:15 p.m. She asked me to sign it. She told me to make things easier and to let Greg manage the accounts. I refused. I told her then, as I state now, that she will never have authority over my estate. She is a liar, and she is a thief." It was the final, devastating blow. He had, from the grave, provided the exact date, the exact time, and the exact words of the attempted fraud. He had corroborated Samuel Ortiz's testimony. He had corroborated everything. He finished, "I leave my estate to my granddaughter, Gabriella Thompson, with full clarity, with full love, and with a sound mind. Let this be my final word. Do not," he glared, "disrespect my memory by challenging it." The screen went black. No one moved. No one breathed. The only sound was a high-pitched, keening sob. It was Vanessa. Judge Doyle stared at the black screen for a full 10 seconds. She took off her glasses. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. Then she looked up. Her eyes were blazing. "We are in recess," she said, her voice shaking with a cold, controlled fury. "For 15 minutes." She stood. "Be back. I will deliver my verdict tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. She slammed her gavel down. The sound was like a thunderclap. As she swept out of the courtroom, the first low rumble of an actual storm broke outside the courthouse windows. A flash of lightning lit the room, illuminating Vanessa Hale's face, which was a mask of utter and complete ruin. The storm from the night before had scrubbed the sky clean. The morning light that flooded courtroom 3B was sharp, bright, and merciless. At 8:50 in the morning, the room was already a fire hazard, packed wall to wall with reporters, lawyers from other firms, and a public gallery that buzzed with anticipation. DA Jordan Pike was in his usual seat. Marta and Samuel Ortiz sat together, their faces nervous but resolute. Vanessa Hale was a ghost. She sat at the plaintiff's table, her face a pale, puffy mask. The defiant navy dress from yesterday was now just a dress, rumpled and sad. The stain, the color she had wielded like a weapon, was gone from her lips. She looked hollowed out. Colton Briggs sat beside her, his shoulders slumped, aimlessly shuffling a stack of papers that were now utterly useless. My father, Greg Thompson, was not at their table. He was in the very last row of the gallery, huddled near the exit, a man trying to become invisible. At precisely 9 o'clock, the bailiff's voice cracked through the room. "All rise." Judge Miriam Doyle entered. She did not look at the gallery. She did not look at me. She sat, opened the file, and fixed her gaze on Vanessa and Colton Briggs. The silence in the room was absolute. "I have reviewed all testimony and evidence in the matter of the estate of Arthur Whitlow," she began, her voice cold and clear, a judgment in itself. "The findings of this court are unambiguous. The plaintiff, Ms. Hale, brought this action alleging lack of testamentary capacity on the part of the deceased and undue influence on the part of the respondent, Ms. Thompson. On the first matter, capacity," Doyle continued, "this court finds the plaintiff's claim to be not just without merit, but frankly, an insult to the deceased's memory. The expert testimony of Dr. Priya Menon, confirming Judge Whitlow's score of 29 out of 30 on a mental state exam after the will's final codicil was signed, is definitive. The testimony of his bank manager, his housekeeper, his foundation accountant, and the video evidence of him completing a New York Times Saturday crossword in ink all paint a singular, irrefutable picture. Judge Arthur Whitlow was a man of superior intellect and sound mind until his final breath. On the second matter, undue influence," her voice hardened, "this court finds that the plaintiff's claim is a projection. The evidence does not show undue influence by Ms. Thompson. It shows a clear, calculated, and predatory pattern of financial exploitation and emotional manipulation by the plaintiff, Ms. Hale, directed against the deceased for a period of 22 years. Doyle looked down at her notes. The forensic accountant's chart, showing a baseline transfer of $660,000, punctuated by emergency spikes correlating precisely with the plaintiff's documented financial failures, is damning. The emails, the fabricated hardship claims, the attempt to gain control of his accounts with an unsigned medical power of attorney, and the plaintiff's own recorded words. It is the most blatant pattern of bad faith dealing this court has seen in recent memory. "This court also notes," she said, looking directly at Briggs, "the pattern of abusive procedural tactics, including the dissemination of fraudulent psychological reports to the press and the attempt to intimidate the respondent by contacting her employer. These are not the actions of a grieving relative. They are the actions of a party with no case, attempting to win by slander and attrition. Therefore, the ruling of this court is as follows," she said, her voice rising to a formal proclamation. "The challenge to the will of Arthur Whitlow is dismissed. With extreme prejudice, the will, and its codicils, are affirmed and upheld in their entirety. Ms. Gabriella Thompson is hereby confirmed as the sole and rightful executrix of the estate. Furthermore, Doyle continued, her gaze unwavering, this court finds that this lawsuit was frivolous, vexatious, and brought with malicious intent. The plaintiff, Vanessa Hale, is hereby ordered to pay all court costs, as well as the entirety of the respondent's reasonable attorney's fees and all associated legal costs. She stacked her papers, and this court, she added, as a final, crushing blow, is referring the full transcript of this hearing, along with the financial evidence and the testimony of Dr. Lane, to the civil prosecutor's office for review of potential fraud. A sound tore from Vanessa's throat. It was not a word, but a raw, animal shriek of loss and rage. No, you can't. She lunged to her feet, her chair flying backward. I am his family. I am his son's wife. I am a mother. Judge Doyle's gavel came down with the force of a thunderclap. Order! Ms. Hale, you will be silent. One more word, and I will have the bailiff remove you in handcuffs for contempt. Vanessa stood there, trembling, her face purple, her mask of composure utterly shattered. She was, for the first time, truly seen. She stared at Doyle, then at me, her chest heaving, and then, as if her strings had been cut, she collapsed into her chair, a sobbing, defeated woman. Briggs didn't move. He just stared at the table, his career in Lakefield finished. We are adjourned, Doyle said, and her gavel cracked again. The room exploded. Reporters surged from their seats, a wave of bodies and cameras. I stood, my legs shaking, as the adrenaline of 2 years of battle finally began to recede. Gabby. I turned, my father. He had pushed through the frantic crowd, his face a ruin of tears and snot. He looked pathetic. Gabby, honey, he pleaded, grabbing for my arm. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know she... He reached for my hand, trying to hold it, to find some purchase. I pulled my hand back. I did not rip it away. I just retrieved it. I slipped it into the pocket of my suit jacket. I looked at this man, this hollow man who had stood by and watched my entire life. You did know, Dad, I said, my voice very quiet, just for him amid the chaos. You've always known. You just chose not to see. You've been choosing for 22 years. Please, he whispered, his eyes frantic. You already chose your side, I said, my voice flat and final. You chose, I can't take sides. That was your choice. And now, this is mine. Goodbye. I turned my back on him and walked toward the exit. The press swarmed me at the door. Microphones and phones were shoved in my face. Ms. Thompson, how do you feel? What's your response to the ruling? A victory for you. I stopped at the doorway, the bright lights of the cameras blinding me. I looked at the sea of faces, all wanting a soundbite, a reaction, a performance of tears or triumph. I would give them neither. I have no statement, I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying over the noise. The truth has a voice of its own. You all just heard it. I began to walk away. Miss Thompson, a moment. I stopped. The voice was not a reporter's. It was loud, formal, and carried authority. Alistair Finch, my grandfather's elderly, aristocratic trust lawyer, was pushing his way through the crowd. Judge Doyle, he called out. The room, which had been emptying, paused. Judge Doyle, who had been halfway to her chambers, stopped and turned, her robes swirling. Mr. Finch? This is highly irregular. The court is adjourned. My apologies, Your Honor, Alistair said, walking briskly toward the bench. He held up a thick cream-colored envelope, sealed with the unmistakable red wax signet of Arthur Whitlow. But my client, Judge Whitlow, left one final, sealed instruction with my firm, an addendum to his personal trust. A new, shocked silence fell over the room. Vanessa stopped sobbing and looked up, her eyes wide with a new, sudden dread. This addendum, Alistair continued, was to be opened and read into the record only upon the meeting of a specific condition. "And what condition is that, Mr. Finch?" Doyle asked. Her curiosity piqued. Alistair looked across the room, past me, his gaze landing on Vanessa Hale. The condition was, and I quote, "In the event that Vanessa Hale or Greg Thompson attack my heir, Gabriella Thompson, with falsehoods regarding my will, and in the event that their challenge fails in a court of law." The condition had been met. "Give it to the bailiff," Doyle commanded. Alistair did. The bailiff passed the envelope up. Judge Doyle took it, examined the unbroken seal, and then tore it open. The sound of the paper ripping was the loudest thing I had ever heard. She unfolded the letter. She read it to herself first. Her eyebrows shot up. A slow, almost imperceptible smile of pure judicial admiration spread across her face. She looked up, over her glasses, at Vanessa. "This," Judge Doyle said, her voice filled with a strange, new energy, "is a provisional codicil from Judge Whitlow. He has, it seems, one last thing to say." She began to read from the document. "I have established," she read, Arthur's words filling the room, "a separate legal entity, the Whitlow Legacy Protection Fund. I have capitalized this fund with a significant portion of my non-estate assets. This fund," she continued, "was created for a single purpose. In the event that Vanessa Hale challenges my will and fails, this fund is hereby directed to enact an immediate civil penalty against her. She has, through moral extortion, taken approximately $660,000 from me over 22 years. This fund is instructed to sue her, in civil court, for the full return of that amount, plus interest." A collective, unified gasp sucked the air from the room. Briggs's head, which had been on his chest, snapped up. Doyle held up a hand. But he goes on. "However," he writes, "in the likely event that Ms. Hale is insolvent and unable to pay, this fund has a secondary, primary purpose. It will not return the money to my heir. Instead, it will attach a lien to every known asset Ms. Hale possesses, and it will divert every single recovered dollar, up to the full $660,000, directly into—" Doyle paused, a genuine smile on her face. "Into the Whitlow Scholarship Fund, a new, fully endowed scholarship at the University of Michigan, created to fund the education of students who were, like my granddaughter, raised by their grandparents." The room was stunned. It was his final move. It was the checkmate. He had anticipated her, planned for her, and in his final act, he had reached back from the grave, taken the money she had stolen from him, and transformed it into a legacy. He had turned her greed into a gift for hundreds of children just like me. The last of Vanessa's strength was gone. She made a small, wet, choking sound and slid forward out of her chair, collapsing onto the courtroom floor in a dead faint. Colton Briggs didn't even try to help her. He just sat there, staring at the wood grain of his table, a man comprehensively and publicly destroyed. I looked to the back row. It was empty. My father was gone. He had slipped out, vanishing into the crowd, finally and completely. I didn't wait for the paramedics. I turned and walked out of the courtroom, my briefcase in my hand. In the great marble hallway, the portraits of the county's former judges watched me pass. I stopped in front of the newest one, the one hung just last month, Arthur Whitlow. He was in his robes, his head slightly tilted, his eyes sharp and bright, a small smile playing on his lips. I stood there for a long time, the chaos of the courtroom echoing behind me. I put my hand up to the cool wall beside the frame. "I did it, Grandpa," I whispered. "We did it." I took a deep breath. I walked toward the massive front doors of the Harbor County Courthouse. I pushed them open. The daylight, which had been so harsh, felt warm. I stepped out onto the wide marble steps. I stood on the exact spot where I had been slapped, the spot where this had all begun. I looked out at the city. The traffic was moving. People were going to lunch. The world was turning. The anger, the shaking, the years of feeling small. It was all gone. I was not the girl on the porch, I was not the victim on the steps. I smoothed the lapels of my jacket, I lifted my chin, and I walked down the steps, into the light, leaving the noise and the wreckage behind me. The story was over. The case was closed, and the truth, my grandfather's truth, was ringing in the air, long after I was gone. Thank you all so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are listening from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us extra support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.